When I think about everything that happened, I feel a slow heaviness inside my chest, like someone quietly placing stones on my heart, one at a time. My name is Hannah, and this is a story I never thought I would share. I want to speak gently. I want to remember slowly. Because sometimes, when things happen inside a family, they do not arrive like storms. They arrive like soft rain, unnoticed at first, until one day you realize the ground is completely wet. Everything began with something very simple, something so ordinary that I ignored it for a long time. My son began showering every night, not just once in a while, not because he came home sweaty or tired from sports, not because he liked warm water before sleeping. It happened every single night, with the same slow routine, around the same quiet hour, when everyone else was already sleeping or close to sleep. At first, I thought it was sweet, maybe even a good habit. After all, most parents struggle to make their kids shower. Some children fight about brushing their teeth or keeping themselves clean, but my son, whose name is Daniel, suddenly became strict and consistent about it, as if it was part of his identity. He never missed a night, not even once. Even when he came home late, or when we returned from long family visits, or when he said he was tired, he still showered. Sometimes even when he looked pale or stressed or emotionally far away. But before we get lost in what happened later, I want to tell you who Daniel was and who I was and who we were as a family, because our story makes more sense when you understand the quiet love, the ordinary life, and the things we did not realize we were losing, piece by piece. Daniel was always a gentle child, quiet, calm, polite, and soft-spoken. He was never loud, never rude, never the kind of boy who ran around breaking things. He took his time before speaking. He listened more than he talked. Sometimes I worried he was too gentle for this world, but I also felt proud because he carried a kindness that felt almost rare. He had these calm brown eyes that always looked like they were thinking about something deeper than their age. He loved drawing, reading stories, and watching people more than television. He was not the boy who asked for expensive toys, loud games, or shiny things. He always asked for quiet, for space, for moments. I remember his early years so clearly. He never liked crowded birthday parties. He never enjoyed noisy relatives who joked too loudly or asked too many questions. He was the child who preferred sitting near the window, holding a book, watching rain, or listening to calm music. When he started growing up, slowly moving from childhood into teenage years, he became even quieter, not in a dramatic way, but in a natural, gentle way, like a bird folding its wings. He still smiled, but his smiles became thinner. He still talked, but his answers became shorter. And yet he never looked angry or rebellious. He simply looked tired, tired of noise, tired of questions, tired of something I could not see. Our family was small, just me, Daniel, and my husband, Mark. Mark was a good man, but very different from Daniel. He believed life was supposed to be strong, busy, productive, always moving. He did not understand silence the way Daniel did. He did not understand softness, sensitivity, or slow feelings. He loved our son, but he often believed something was wrong with him because Daniel did not act like most boys.
I remember one evening when Daniel was around 12. He sat at the dining table, sketching something, a quiet portrait of a girl reading near a tree. Mark walked by, looked at the drawing, and said in a half joking, half serious voice, "Why don't you draw something more exciting? You're a boy. Draw cars, planes, something powerful." Daniel didn't reply. He simply lowered his eyes as if the world had suddenly become heavy. That was the first time I noticed his posture change, like he was holding sadness inside his shoulders. When Daniel turned 14, everything shifted more quietly. He grew taller, thinner, and more reserved. He began spending more time inside his room, not because he was rebellious, but because he said silence made him feel calm. Then came the night showers. At first, I didn't even notice. It started softly one night, then another, then another. Simple, small, harmless. I remember the very first night clearly, even though I didn't know it was the beginning of something bigger. It was winter. The house was cold and calm. We had finished dinner early, and everyone was in bed by 10 p.m. Around 10:30, I heard water running, soft and steady. I thought maybe he forgot to shower earlier, or maybe he enjoyed warm water before sleeping, so I didn't say anything. But then it happened again the next night, and the next, and every night after that. Not once did he skip, not one single night. At first, I admired his routine. I never imagined routine could also be a silent cry. Sometimes I passed by the bathroom door while he was inside. I heard nothing except water. No music, no singing, no humming, no movement. Just water. Slow and steady, like rain, falling without wind. I remember telling my sister about it casually one afternoon. She laughed and said, "At least he's clean. You should be happy." I laughed too. I still regret that laughter. Months passed, and the shower routine became the most predictable part of his life. It was always between 10 p.m. and 10:40 p.m., sometimes shorter, sometimes longer, but always quiet, always private, always closed off. Then slowly, I began noticing other things. Daniel looked more tired in the mornings. His eyes carried a darkness that sleep could not erase. His appetite became smaller. He avoided mirrors. He started wearing long sleeves even when it was warm, saying he just felt more comfortable that way. Still, I did not connect anything. I simply thought teenage years were confusing years. Everyone changes. Everyone feels something they cannot explain. Maybe it was normal. Maybe he needed space. Maybe this was just part of growing up. I trusted silence, but silence is not always safety. Sometimes silence is a locked room. One night, something changed. Something small, but enough to make me pause. He came out of the bathroom with slightly red eyes. Not wet from water, wet from tears. His eyelashes looked heavier, like they were carrying water that had not fallen yet. I asked him gently, "Are you okay? Did something hurt you? Is the water too hot?" He gave me a soft half smile and said, "No, Mom, I just like warm showers. They help me think." I believed him, or maybe I wanted to believe him, because it was easier. Another night, I heard something different behind the door. Not crying, not words, but heavy breathing, like someone trying not to break. I stood outside the door for a second, but walked away thinking he needed privacy. If I had stayed longer, maybe things would have changed sooner. Maybe he would have known he wasn't alone. Maybe. But life does not speak in maybe until it is too late.
As weeks turned into months, something inside my heart began to whisper, "Something is wrong." Not loud, just a soft, persistent whisper, like a small knock on a quiet door. So I decided I would gently observe him more. Not to control him, not to accuse him, but to understand. Because love is not only saying, "I care." Love is also saying, "I am watching you, even when you think no one is watching." I didn't know that the truth was already growing behind that bathroom door. A truth my son carried alone. A truth I had been too slow to see. And one night, one simple, quiet night, I finally chose to follow him. After that night, when I first felt something was quietly changing inside my son, life around us continued like nothing was wrong. The days still passed the same way, the sunlight still entered the house through the same windows, the dust on the furniture still settled every Friday morning when I cleaned. The kitchen smelled of the same simple meals I cooked. Nothing on the outside changed, but inside the walls, inside our family, inside my son, something invisible was slowly shaping itself. I kept watching Daniel, gently, not in a controlling way, but with a soft, silent concern. I started noticing everything I had ignored before, not because I was careless, but because I never imagined those little things meant anything deeper. Sometimes the truth hides behind habits we dismiss as normal. Daniel had always been a quiet boy, but now his silence felt different. It didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt like silence layered over silence, like someone placing blankets over something fragile, trying to hide it, protect it, or bury it. I could not tell which one. One afternoon, I knocked on Daniel's bedroom door before entering. I always respected his privacy because he valued his space so much. He was sitting at his desk, drawing again. His pencil moved slowly, almost painfully, like he was forcing each line to exist. "Can I sit with you for a moment?" I asked. He nodded gently without lifting his eyes from the paper. I sat on his bed, watching him in silence. He was drawing a small child standing in the rain under a streetlight alone. No umbrella, no jacket, just standing there, with arms wrapped around his own body. The picture felt like an emotion, not a scene. "That looks meaningful," I whispered. He paused for a moment and then answered in a very soft tone, "Sometimes rain feels quieter than people." Those words traveled through my chest like a cold breeze, but I smiled softly instead of reacting because I didn't want to make him feel observed or judged. "That's a deep thought," I replied gently. He only shrugged and kept drawing. There was something inside him, something unspoken, and his art was the closest door to it. Over the next few days, I tried small conversations during meals. "How are your classes?" "They're fine." "Are you getting along with your classmates?" "Yes." "Anyone giving you trouble?" "No." "Would you like me to help with anything?" "I'm okay." Polite answers, short replies, no irritation, no disrespect, only distance. Sometimes emotional distance hurts more than anger. My husband, Mark, did not notice anything. He was busy with work, deadlines, projects, and plans. He believed emotions were like dust, something that could be wiped away quickly if someone tried hard enough. One evening, while Daniel was in the shower again, I spoke to Mark about it. "Have you noticed that he showers every night? I mean, every single night, no matter what?" Mark chuckled lightly. "That means he's clean and responsible. Isn't that something mothers usually want?" "I do want that, but it feels different. He comes out looking sad sometimes." Mark looked confused.
Maybe he's just tired, Hannah. Teenagers get emotional. As long as he's not causing trouble, he's fine. That response ended the conversation, but not my worry. Around this time, our home atmosphere also started changing in a subtle way. We were not a broken family, but we were slowly becoming a quiet one. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from peace, the kind that comes from emotional separation. Meals grew quieter, laughter became rare, even the walls felt like they listened more than they echoed. Daniel stopped spending time in the living room. He spent most evenings in his room with the door slightly closed, not locked, not slammed, just closed enough to mean, I'm here, but I'm not with you. Despite my concerns, Daniel remained gentle and respectful. He still said, "Good night, Mom," every evening. He still hugged me, though the hugs became shorter. He still helped with dishes sometimes, though less frequently. He still said, "I'm fine," whenever I asked. But there is a difference between fine and surviving, and we humans often confuse them. As months passed, his physical changes became clearer too. He looked thinner, not drastically, but like someone who wasn't eating with appetite. His shoulders looked stiff, his walk became slightly slower, and his eyes, those deep, gentle eyes, started looking like they carried stories no one had heard. I noticed one more thing. He did not like being touched suddenly anymore. Whenever I placed my hand on his shoulder unexpectedly, even gently, he flinched slightly. Not like someone startled, but like someone who had learned to expect something uncomfortable. He quickly covered it with a smile, but my heart caught that flinch like a whisper of truth. One night, I decided to make him tea. Chamomile, his childhood favorite. I knocked on his door softly. "Come in," he said with a soft voice. He was sitting on the floor this time, leaning against his bed, holding a small notebook with drawings. I sat beside him slowly and handed him the warm cup. "You used to love this tea," I said. He smiled a little. "I still do." I wanted to ask so many things, but instead I asked only one. "Do you feel safe, Daniel?" He didn't look surprised, offended, or confused. Instead, he lowered his head, inhaled slowly, and whispered, "I try to." Those 3 words felt like a knife with a warm blade, sharp but hidden inside softness. I wanted to hug him, pull him into my arms, and promise that I would protect him forever. But I didn't want to push him, so I spoke softly. "You can tell me anything, anytime, even if it feels hard." He nodded, but he didn't say anything else. The next few weeks made my concern grow even stronger. Daniel's night showers began lasting longer, sometimes almost an hour. When he came out, his cheeks looked slightly red, not like someone warmed by pleasant steam, but like someone who had been trying not to cry. I also noticed he carried his towel like a shield over his arms or chest, and he rushed straight into his room after showering, closing the door quietly every time. One night, while I was cleaning the hallway, I noticed something small but important. Outside the bathroom door, on the floor near the wall, lay a small wet tissue, as if someone wiped tears before walking out. My heart paused. Not a runny-nose tissue, not a cleaning tissue. A tissue wet like it had absorbed emotion. That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking, quietly but constantly. Was he being bullied? Was he feeling ashamed of something?
Did he hurt himself accidentally? Was he dealing with something online? Did someone make him feel unsafe? Was he scared of growing up? Or was it something darker? Fear is a silent visitor that arrives through imagination before truth. One Saturday afternoon, I gently asked if he wanted to go out, maybe a small walk, a movie, a cafe, anything. He softly said, maybe next time. But I noticed something. He looked guilty for saying no, like someone who wanted to accept but couldn't. Later that day, I folded his laundry and noticed something else. Most of his shirts were long-sleeved, even pajamas, even home shirts. It wasn't winter anymore. I knocked on his door and entered gently. Daniel, why do you always wear long sleeves? Aren't you feeling warm lately? He smiled carefully. It just feels comfortable, Mom. He didn't sound defensive or dishonest, but sometimes truth wears comfortable clothes too. That night, I stood outside the bathroom door longer than usual, listening. No crying, no whispering, just water and long silence. But silence can scream. 2 days later, something happened that finally shook me deeply. I walked past his room early in the morning to place fresh towels in the closet. His door was slightly open, and he was asleep. The blanket was half off his body, and I could see part of his arm. There were faint, red marks. Not cuts, not bruises, not clear injuries, just marks like someone had been rubbing, scratching, or pressing hard. My breath caught inside my throat. I did not touch him. I did not wake him. I simply backed away slowly, closed the door gently, and held the wall to steady myself. A mother knows. Even when she does not understand, she knows. That evening, while cooking dinner, I dropped a glass accidentally. It shattered into several pieces. The sound was loud, sharp, and sudden. Daniel rushed into the kitchen quickly, his eyes wide, breathing heavy, as if expecting something bad to happen. "It's okay," I whispered. "It was just a glass." He nodded and walked away, but my reaction stayed with me. He responded like someone trained to expect harm. Where could that feeling come from? Why was he protecting himself from invisible danger? That night, something inside me changed too. I was no longer only concerned. I was now afraid. Not afraid of him, afraid for him, afraid of what he silently lived with, afraid of what he didn't know how to say, afraid of what I might learn, yet more afraid of what would happen if I never asked. So I made a decision, a gentle but serious one. I would follow him one night, not to invade his privacy, but to protect his soul. Not because I did not trust him, but because I loved him too deeply to pretend nothing was happening. And with that choice, the quiet road leading toward the truth began. The day I chose to follow my son, I felt a quiet mix of fear and responsibility inside me. I did not want to be a controlling parent. I did not want to break his trust. But I also could not stay still and watch him slowly disappear into a silence he could not describe. Sometimes love is not giving someone space. Sometimes love is staying close, even if they pull away, even if they don't ask, even if they don't speak. That night, I waited until the moment he silently walked toward the bathroom, holding his towel the same way he always did, neatly folded, pressed close to his chest, as if he wanted no part of his body uncovered, even for a second. He walked quietly, almost carefully, like someone who is used to moving without drawing attention. He closed the bathroom door softly and twisted the lock. Within a few seconds, I heard the water running. I stood in the hallway, my back against the wall, listening to the soft water sound that had become part of my nightly life. But this time, it sounded different, because now my heart was paying attention. I didn't want to frighten him, so I did not stand directly in front of the door. I stood near enough to hear,
but far enough to hide my presence if he opened the door suddenly. A few minutes passed, quiet and slow. Then I heard it, something I had not noticed clearly before. Breathing. Heavy breathing. Unsteady breathing. Not like someone tired after a long day, but like someone trying to hold back emotions that were too heavy to stay inside. There were no words, no crying sounds, no sobbing, only the kind of breathing that comes with swallowed pain. My heart tightened. I took a step closer, unable to stop myself. The water kept running, steady and endless. Then, through the soft sound of water, I heard something else. A small, almost silent gasp, like someone pressing their palm over their mouth to prevent a tear or sound from escaping. I leaned slightly closer, afraid but unable to move away. "Daniel?" I whispered in my mind, but not out loud. I wanted to knock, but I froze, torn between respecting his privacy and fearing for his emotional safety. After nearly 40 minutes, the water finally turned off. I quickly went back into my room and sat on the bed, pretending to read something. My heart beat so loudly it felt like he would hear it from the hallway. A minute later, he came out, wrapped in steam and silence. His towel was around his shoulders, and he walked straight to his room, avoiding my eyes even though I was not in his direct path. That night, I barely slept. I questioned myself over and over. What if he finds out I was listening? Will he feel betrayed? Will he close his heart even more? What if I'm imagining everything? But what if I'm not? A mother carries the weight of two possibilities, being wrong and being too late. The next day, I decided I would not confront him immediately. Instead, I would build emotional closeness more intentionally. I planned a slow approach, small conversations, gentle opportunities, moments that could let him open safely. So I began by spending more time near him without forcing interaction. I would quietly sit near him when he drew, or fold laundry in his room while he watched something, or drink tea at the dining table while he did homework. Little by little, his body language changed. His shoulders relaxed slightly when I entered a room. His eyes stayed on me a little longer when we talked. He did not open up, but he did not close further either. That small shift felt like hope. A week later, on a quiet Sunday morning, I decided to take a gentle, emotional step.
We were sitting on the porch, watching the slow movement of the trees. I placed my hand lightly on his back, not sudden, not strong, just soft. "Daniel," I said, "can I ask you something? And you can answer only if you want to?" He nodded, but he kept his eyes on the trees. "Do night showers help you feel something that you cannot feel outside the bathroom?" He paused. His breathing changed slightly, like his body understood the question before his mind decided on an answer. "Yes," he whispered. His voice was thin, fragile, like a thread pulled tight. I waited. I didn't ask more. I didn't pressure him. Sometimes silence after an answer is more powerful than another question. After a long, quiet minute, he added softly, "The water feels like a blanket, a place where nobody sees me." My heart tightened. But I stayed calm. "I'm listening," I said, almost in a whisper. He did not speak again after that, not about the showers, not about his feelings, but the door was slightly open now. I had seen a small piece of the truth, even if not the whole story. A few days later, something happened in the evening that pushed the conflict forward. My husband came home early, frustrated from work. He was not a cruel man, just someone who believed strength meant pushing through everything without emotion. He saw Daniel sitting alone in the living room, scrolling quietly through his phone, wearing another long-sleeve shirt, even though it was warm. Without thinking, he said in a loud, tired voice, "Why do you always look like you're carrying the whole world? You're young. You should be happy. Stop acting so sad."
Daniel's face didn't change much, but his hands trembled slightly. He lowered his eyes and whispered, "Sorry." That answer hurt me because no child should apologize for a sadness they don't even understand yet. After my husband went upstairs, I sat beside Daniel slowly. "You don't have to say sorry for how you feel," I whispered. He nodded, but his lips pressed together tightly, holding back many words. Over the next few days, my focus became clear. I had to reach him gently, without pressure, without fear, without judgment. So I tried new small emotional invitations. One night, I knocked on his door with 2 cups of warm milk. "Can I join you for a few minutes?" He agreed. We sat together in silence first. Then I asked quietly, "What thought do you fall asleep with most nights?" He hesitated, then answered with a quiet voice that sounded like a falling leaf. "A thought that I wish I understood myself better." Those words were heavy. He wasn't confused about life. He was confused about himself. That same week, I noticed his drawing style changed. He no longer drew peaceful scenes or nature. Instead, he drew closed spaces, hallways, locked doors, foggy mirrors, windows with no view. One drawing had a figure sitting on the bathroom floor with water pouring like heavy rain, but the figure had no face. When I saw that drawing, my eyes filled with tears. I asked in a shaky voice, "Is this you?" He didn't answer verbally, but the way he lowered his eyes told me everything. It became clear that something inside him was hurting, and the bathroom had become his emotional shelter, the only place where he allowed himself to release whatever weighed on his heart. That realization scared me, because emotional pain, when hidden, can turn into dark loneliness. Then something happened that pushed me even further. One night, while I was rearranging blankets in his room, with his permission, something fell from under his pillow. A small notebook. Not a school notebook, not a drawing pad, a personal one. Black cover, no labels, no stickers, no name. I froze, not knowing whether to open it or not. Part of me said, "Don't invade his privacy." Another part said, "What if this notebook holds the answer that could save him?" In the end, I did not open it. I placed it back gently, and that choice is something I still think about to this day. But that moment confirmed something. Daniel had a secret. Not necessarily something wrong or shameful, but something too emotional, too painful, or too complex to share. And secrets grow heavy when carried alone. The conflict reached its early peak one night after dinner. Daniel went to shower as usual. The water ran, and ran, and ran. 40 minutes passed. Then 50. Then almost an hour. My heartbeat sped up. I walked closer quietly, my palms sweating. I pressed my ear to the door very gently, only for a second. This time, there was no breathing, no crying, and no movement. Only water. Something inside me whispered, "Something is wrong." I knocked lightly. "Daniel, are you okay?" No answer. I knocked again, slightly louder. "Daniel, sweetheart, please answer me." Still no answer. My voice trembled. I placed my hand on the door, and my heart raced as if it were trying to break out of my chest. "Please, say something," I whispered. Still silent. And at that moment, the story shifted from quiet observation to fearful urgency. I stayed awake that night not because I wanted to check again, but because everything inside me felt unsettled. I wondered if I had handled it gently enough or if I should have held him longer. I kept thinking about how many nights he might have cried without me even knowing there were tears behind those showers. The next morning, he woke up late again. He looked tired, like his sleep had been heavy, not peaceful. I wanted to ask if he was okay, but I held myself back for a moment because I didn't want him to feel watched or pressured.
Instead, I made breakfast quietly and waited for him to come to the table. When he finally arrived, he sat slowly, with his shoulders slightly curved inward. I smiled at him, even though my chest felt heavy. We ate quietly for a few minutes. Then I said gently, "Thank you for trusting me last night, even a little." He did not reply immediately. He just nodded, and for the first time in a while, he maintained eye contact for more than a second. That was enough for me. I didn't want to force anything. Later in the day, I tried to behave normally, but with more awareness. I watched how he moved, how he reacted, how long he stayed silent, and how quickly he forced a smile when his father asked something. My husband, still unaware of the deeper issue, kept saying, "He just needs discipline. Boys get soft when they're treated like glass." I didn't argue back because I didn't want our son to hear us disagree. Instead, I said softly, "He needs gentleness more than discipline right now. There is something hurting him inside." My husband shook his head and walked away. I could see he was not ready to understand. Sometimes adults need time too, just like children. That evening, I waited again, not to check on him, but to simply be present. He stared at his books but didn't open them. He held his pencil without writing. His mind was somewhere else, maybe somewhere far from this house. He finally whispered, "Mom, do you think people can break even when they look normal?" I felt those words like cold water down my spine. I moved closer and said, "Yes, some of the most broken people smile the most." He looked down again and whispered, "I don't want to be weak." I placed my hand on his back and said, "You are not weak, you are wounded. There is a difference." He didn't say anything else, but I could feel something shifting. A small door opening, even if only a few inches. That night, he didn't shower immediately. He sat on his bed, quiet, uncertain, and maybe a little afraid. I didn't ask anything. I simply stayed nearby, folding clothes slowly to give him silent comfort. After about an hour, he finally stood up and whispered, "I think I still need the shower." I didn't stop him, but I walked to the bathroom door and said, "If you feel like talking before, during, or after, I will be right here." He did not respond, but he didn't close the door fully either. This time, it stayed half closed. Inside, I heard only water. No crying, no sniffing, no shaking sounds like before. Maybe nothing happened. Maybe everything was happening inside his silent world. Either way, he knew I was there. When he finished, he walked out slowly and sat on his bed. I gently sat beside him and said, "You are not alone in anything you feel." He placed his head on my shoulder and whispered, "Mom, I'm scared of myself." My breath paused, but I didn't react with shock. I stroked his hair and said, "Thank you for saying it out loud. I'm here. We will face it together." He cried softly, quietly, slowly, like the tears were finally allowed to exist outside the steam of the shower. That was the first night he cried in open air, not under running water, and that small change felt like a giant step. That night became a kind of quiet milestone, but not a solution. He still looked fragile. His shoulders still carried something invisible. And even though he now allowed me near him, he still carried a silence with edges like a paper that could cut if touched wrong. The next morning, I gently knocked on his door before entering, even though it was never locked. "Good morning," I said softly, keeping my voice warm. He nodded slowly, still waking up, but his eyes seemed more aware, or maybe more exposed. I sat down on the edge of his bed and spoke very gently. "You don't have to explain anything today, or tomorrow. We will move one breath at a time." He looked at me for a second and asked in a low voice, "Are you going to tell Dad?"
I paused, not because I didn't know my answer, but because I wanted him to feel included in it. I will only tell him what you want him to know. You are not a problem to solve. You are a person to understand. He lowered his head and whispered, I don't want him to think I'm strange. I placed my hand on his arm and said, You are not strange. You are hurting, and that is human. He took a slow breath and nodded lightly, as though trying to believe it. During lunchtime, I tried to keep the environment calm. He barely touched his food, only moving it around with his spoon. His father sat across the table, finishing his meal, not sensing the emotional weight. At one moment, his father casually said, You look tired. You should sleep earlier instead of staying in the bathroom so long. My son's hand froze mid-movement. His lips tightened, his eyes shifted down. I immediately answered calmly, He is going through something, and we are taking it step by step. Please be gentle. My husband looked confused, but didn't push further. Our son quietly excused himself and went to his room. I waited a minute, then followed slowly, carefully. I knocked softly on his door. Can I come in? I asked gently. There was a pause, long enough to worry me. Then he answered, barely audible, Okay. I entered quietly and sat on the floor instead of the bed, so I didn't feel intrusive. He whispered, Mom, I don't like when Dad comments. It makes me feel different. Different how? I asked gently. He stared at the wall for several seconds before whispering, Like something is wrong with my mind. I kept my voice calm, almost like a soft blanket. Nothing is wrong with your mind. Something hurt your heart, and your mind is trying to protect it. He slowly wiped below his eye with his sleeve, though no tears fully fell. Mom, showering makes my head quiet. That's why I go there. I nodded slowly, careful not to react too strongly. Does the quiet happen only when the water is running? I asked gently. He thought for a moment and said, Yes. When the water hits me, it's like everything else disappears. No sound inside, no images, no pressure. And when you stop? I asked softly. He looked down. Then he whispered a word that chilled me. It comes back. I leaned forward slightly, speaking slowly so he didn't feel rushed. What comes back, sweetheart? He looked scared. His fingers fidgeted. He didn't answer immediately, and I didn't push. His breathing changed faster, but controlled. After almost 30 seconds, he whispered, Thoughts I don't want. I kept my voice as steady as a quiet river. You are safe telling me. I won't judge. I won't panic. I won't leave. He swallowed hard and said quietly, I think about things that make me feel upset, things that make me feel like I'm not good enough. My heart felt heavy, but I stayed calm.
He added, And sometimes I think life would be easier if I didn't feel anything. Those words pierced me silently, like a whisper carried by cold air. I didn't gasp. I didn't cry. I didn't show fear. Instead, I slowly moved closer, not to fix, but to be present. Then I asked, When did these thoughts start? He closed his eyes for a second, then opened them slowly. I think sometime after school changed. I nodded. And did something happen at school? He hesitated. His breathing shifted again. Short, shallow, guarded. Mom, if I tell you, will you promise not to get angry? I promise, I whispered, and I promise to stay right here. He paused, then whispered, It's because of them, the boys at school. When he said, the boys at school,
I didn't push further right away. I let the room breathe for a moment. Sometimes silence can feel like pressure, but other times it becomes a gentle space where truth can come out on its own. I sat there on the floor, hands resting calmly on my lap, not moving closer, not pulling away. Then, with a slow and steady voice, I said, "You can tell me only what feels safe right now. We can take it one sentence at a time." He nodded slightly, still not looking directly at me. His fingers rubbed together nervously, as if he was trying to warm his own courage. I waited, not even blinking too often, just letting him know that nothing he said would scare me away. After almost half a minute of quiet, he whispered, "They say things about me." I didn't ask who. I didn't ask what. Both could come later. Instead, I asked gently, "And how do those words make you feel?" He swallowed, voice shaky but controlled. "Small, like I don't belong anywhere." That sentence hurt more than any long explanation ever could. He continued slowly, "They don't push me or hit me. They just talk, but the words stay in my head. I can't stop hearing them." I leaned forward slightly, still gentle. Words can hurt deeply even if they sound small to others. Your feelings are real. His eyes filled with tears, but he tried to hold them back. And in a thin, trembling voice, he said, "They call me weak." That moment felt like a tiny piece of him was placed in my hands, fragile, precious, easily broken. I didn't respond with arguments like, "You're not weak," or "Ignore them," because when someone is hurting, they don't need fast comfort. They need slow understanding. So I asked softly, "When they say that, what do you believe about yourself in that moment?" He hesitated, then quietly admitted, "I start thinking maybe they're right." My heart tightened, but I stayed steady. Then he added, "I don't know how to stop thinking about their words. I replay them all night. The shower is the only place where the noise inside me stops for a while." I listened quietly, nodding slowly, and then said, "You've found a way to cope, even if it is lonely. That doesn't make you weak. It shows you're trying your best." He looked at me for a moment, and I could see confusion mixed with relief. He wasn't used to hearing that trying, even silently, could be a form of strength. After another pause, he whispered something I had never considered. "Mom, it's not just what they say. It's what I fear might be true." I leaned closer, resting my voice in a calm whisper. When fear becomes louder than truth, it feels real, but that doesn't mean it is. He blinked slowly, absorbing each word as if they were small drops of safety. After a long pause, I asked gently, "Would you like to tell me what you are most afraid is true?" He looked down again, but this time not with avoidance, more like he was gathering courage from somewhere deep inside. He whispered so softly I almost missed it, "That maybe I'm not good enough for anyone." That sentence broke something inside of me, but I didn't show pain because this was not my moment. This was his truth, unfolding slowly in the air between us. I took a slow breath and said, "Your value is not decided by anyone else's voice. It is something you are born with, and it does not go away just because someone fails to see it." He listened without speaking, but his eyes softened, as if those words were something he had never been told in that way. After a long pause, I asked gently, "Can I hold your hand?" He nodded, small, slow, but real. His hand was cold, but he didn't pull away. It was the first time he allowed comfort without water running around him. The next day, I decided that our home needed quieter energy, not silent, but softer. I moved slower. I spoke slower. I watched him without making him feel watched. He didn't shower that morning, and I didn't bring attention to it. I wanted him to feel ownership of his healing, not supervision. Around noon, I asked if he wanted to sit outside in the backyard with me. No activities, no deep talks, just daylight and open space. At first, he said, "Maybe later." I nodded and replied, "Whenever you feel like it, I will be outside." I stepped out alone and quietly sat on the bench, listening to the faint sounds around me. Distant traffic, a bird somewhere, the gentle wind brushing the leaves. About 7 minutes later, I heard the door open behind me. He walked out slowly and sat at the far end of the same bench. Not close, not distant, but in a space that allowed him to choose closeness. I didn't speak immediately. I waited. Finally, I said, gently, "It's nice out here. Sometimes air helps the thoughts inside feel lighter." He looked forward, not at me, and whispered, "I like quiet places." I nodded and replied, "I'm learning to like them too."
No questions, no prompting, only shared space. After a bit, he spoke again. "When I'm quiet, my thoughts become clearer, but sometimes they feel heavier." "That makes sense," I said softly. "When we slow down, we can hear ourselves more clearly, and sometimes that's scary." He looked down at his hands and whispered, "I don't want to be scared of myself." His voice didn't shake this time. It sounded more honest than afraid. I gently responded, "You are not your fear. Fear is something you experience, not something you are." He didn't say anything, but he shifted closer by a few inches, the kind of movement that doesn't look big, but feels big when trust is fragile. That evening, I asked if he wanted to eat dinner in the living room instead of the dining table. He nodded. We ate quietly while watching something soft. Not cartoons, not news, just something neutral and warm, like nature scenes with calming narration. He seemed more relaxed there, maybe because there was no direct eye contact, no pressure to talk, no expectation. After dinner, I didn't ask if he planned to shower. Instead, I said gently, "Tonight, whatever you need to feel safe is okay." He didn't respond, but I saw a small shift in his expression, like his shoulders loosened just a little. Later that night, he walked toward the bathroom slowly, stopped halfway and turned to look at me. He didn't speak, and neither did I. Then he said quietly, "Mom, will you stay near again?" I nodded, stood up carefully, and walked toward the hallway, not too close to him, not too far, just close enough that he could feel presence, not pressure. He placed his hand on the bathroom door, then paused. He looked unsure, almost like he was asking himself a private question. Then, in a voice softer than a whisper, he said, "What if I try without turning the water on first?" My heart softened, but I kept my voice steady and calm. "That's a brave idea," I whispered. "And if it becomes too much, you can turn it on. There is no failing here." He nodded slowly and stepped inside, leaving the door slightly open again, the same safe signal as before. Inside, I heard only breathing. Not sobbing, not rushing sounds, just breathing. After a few moments, he whispered from inside, "It feels strange." I gently replied, "Strange is okay. New things often feel strange." There was a pause. Then he said something remarkable. Not loud, not confident, but real. "It's not as scary when I know someone is near."
I placed my hand gently on the door frame, not pushing it, not knocking, simply resting it there, and whispered, "You will never have to face your thoughts alone. Not anymore." He didn't cry. He didn't panic. He didn't run the water. He stood there, breathing. And that moment, tiny, quiet, easily overlooked, was a victory. Not dramatic, not cinematic, not instant, but real. Healing doesn't always look like tears. Sometimes it looks like staying instead of running. For the rest of that evening, I didn't do anything extraordinary. Sometimes healing comes not from special moments, but from normal ones, finally feeling safe. He came out of the bathroom without turning the water on. He looked unsure, not proud, not defeated, just unsure. And I didn't rush to label it a success or struggle. Instead, I smiled gently and said, "Thank you for trying in your own way." He nodded and we walked to the living room together. I didn't touch him or hug him right away. I let him choose the distance. He slowly sat closer than usual, still not touching, but not separate. It was a small miracle, disguised as an ordinary moment. Later, I made warm tea for myself and warm milk for him. No instructions, no questions, only presence. We sat quietly listening to the soft ticking of the wall clock. Not the tense kind of silence, but the kind where two people finally breathe at the same rhythm. After a few minutes, he whispered, "Mom, today didn't feel as heavy as other days." I looked at him gently and replied, "I'm glad today felt lighter. Light doesn't always come fast, but it does come." He nodded, and then, after another small pause, he asked, "Do you think my mind will ever be normal again?" The way he said normal held so much fear, as if he had stepped outside of what humans were allowed to feel. So I answered slowly, "Our minds don't have to be like someone else's to be okay. Sometimes sensitivity means you feel life deeply, both the pain and the beauty." He didn't speak, but his eyes softened, like a window unlocked slightly from inside. Before bedtime, he hesitated at his doorway. He didn't want to ask, but he didn't want to be alone either. So I helped him by offering the words, "If you would like, I can sit in your room until you fall asleep." He didn't answer verbally. He simply pulled his blanket back and laid down. I sat in the chair nearby, not too close, not too far, just close enough that he could feel presence, not pressure. After a few minutes, when the room felt safe and still, he whispered with his eyes half closed, "How do people stop believing bad things about themselves?" His voice wasn't full of tears anymore. It was full of curiosity, the first sign of inner rebuilding. I thought for a moment, and then said, "There are two ways. One is when someone tells them enough love until they slowly believe it. The other is when they learn to talk to themselves kindly, even when no one else is there." He turned his head slightly toward me and asked, "Which one is faster?" "Neither needs to be fast," I whispered. "What matters is that you don't walk through it alone." He blinked slowly, sleep pulling gently at him. Just when I thought he was drifting off, he spoke again, even quieter, almost like he was speaking from a deeper place inside. "Mom, sometimes I don't know who I am. At school, I feel small. At home, I try to look normal. And inside, I don't know which one is real." Those words were not dramatic. They were raw, human, honest. I kept my voice calm, steady, and warm. "You are still growing, and growing feels confusing sometimes. But the real you is the one who feels deeply, the one who tries, the one who cares, even when it hurts." His eyes glistened, but he didn't cry. After a few seconds, he whispered, "Can you stay until I sleep?" "Yes," I whispered.
I'll stay as long as you need. This time he closed his eyes with a softer breath. Not peaceful yet, but no longer drowning. He fell asleep slowly, not escaping sleep, but entering it. And when he finally drifted off, I whispered into the quiet room where only truth belonged. You are not broken. You are healing. Maya didn't interrupt. She didn't defend herself. She didn't accuse him. She simply looked at him not with anger, but with a deep, wounded curiosity. Her silence was heavier than any argument. Arav slowly sat down, rubbed his forehead, and sighed. Maya, I know you're thinking something is wrong. And you're right, but it's not what you think. Still silent, she waited. Arav finally gathered the courage and spoke, his voice shaky. I wasn't distant because I don't love you. I was distant because I'm scared I might lose you. Maya blinked, stunned. This wasn't the direction she expected at all. I did not raise my voice. I did not try to pull his hands away. I did not ask him why he was doing it. I simply stepped closer, very slowly, like someone approaching a frightened bird. My voice was soft, almost like whispering into a quiet room. Son, I am here. You are not alone. Look at me when you are ready, not because you must, but because I care. I gently took a towel from the shelf, warm, soft, fresh. I placed it next to him, not touching him, just making it available. Then I turned on the small heater because the bathroom floor was cold. Not a single sentence of blame escaped my mouth. He froze. His breathing changed. For a moment, I could hear the sound of the small bathroom fan and the dripping tap. I sat down on the floor, a little distance away, not blocking the door, not cornering him. I did not stare at him. I simply sat, looking down at my hands, letting him know that I was present, but not demanding. Whatever is hurting you, you do not have to face it by yourself anymore. His shoulders started shaking. His hands loosened. His eyes turned red, but he still did not speak. I placed a bottle of water near him and slid it gently toward his side. Only then, very slowly, he whispered one small sentence, barely a breath. I am sorry. I shook my head softly. No, you do not need to be sorry. You need to be safe. He covered his face again, but this time he wasn't hiding from me. He was breaking, not escaping. After a few quiet seconds, I asked softly, would you like to move to your room? Or we can stay here, whatever feels easier. His reply came in a fragile, broken voice. Can we stay here a little? Of course, I said gently. I will stay as long as you need. So we stayed, in a small bathroom, with no raised voice, no lecture, no questions, no pressure, just presence, just love. We sat there in silence until his breathing became slower, steadier, almost like he was trying to find a safe way back into his own body. When he finally looked up, there was something heavy behind his eyes, something I had never seen in him before. Not sadness, not anger, but deep exhaustion. Like he was carrying something alone no one else could see. He leaned his head gently against the wall, and after a long, quiet pause, he whispered, "It did not start suddenly." His words were slow and careful, like each one might break if he spoke too quickly. I tried to handle it. I tried to ignore it. I tried to pretend I was strong,
but everything kept getting heavier and heavier, and no one saw it. I nodded very slowly, not interrupting, not reacting with shock, not rushing to solve anything. "I see," I whispered. "You were carrying something alone." His lip trembled slightly. "Yes," he replied, "and I thought I could handle it. But then there was this one moment, and it felt like everything inside me just snapped." I felt my heart tighten, but my voice remained steady and warm. "What happened, son?" He swallowed, hands resting on his knees, not hiding now, just tired. "It was that day at school." I waited. No one noticed, but something happened that changed everything. His voice lowered again. "You know how you always told me that people can be unkind, but it does not mean we should believe them?" "Yes," I answered gently. "Well, I really tried not to believe them." He paused again, longer this time. "But that day, I did." A soft tear slid down his cheek, and I did not wipe it. I let it be his tear, his moment, his truth. I whispered, "Tell me only what you feel ready to share." He nodded slowly. "It was during group presentations," he said, voice slightly shaking. "I prepared so much. I spent so many nights trying to make everything good. I wanted them to like it. I wanted the teacher to be proud. I wanted to prove that I was not useless." He took a long, tense breath. But when I started speaking, my voice shook. I forgot one line, and they began laughing quietly. Not loudly, just enough to destroy me.
I felt the weight of his words settle like a cold wind in that small bathroom. They whispered things, small things, but when you hear them enough times, they start living inside you. I waited because I could feel there was more. He continued, and then one of them said a sentence I will never forget. He looked at me with eyes full of years he was too young to carry. They said, "Why does he even try? He looks like someone who already gave up on life." His voice broke, and he covered his mouth as if preventing the pain from escaping too loudly. I moved only one step closer, not to fix, not to question, but to be his anchor. He whispered again, almost breathless, and in that moment, I believed them. He sat there for a moment, staring at the floor tiles as if the details were printed there. His fingers moved slowly, tracing invisible lines on his knees. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost fragile. "It didn't stop that day, Mom," he whispered. "That moment just opened something. After that, everything felt different." He drew in a slow breath. "It wasn't like everyone was mean, not all the time, and it wasn't loud or obvious, like the kind you see in movies where someone is pushed or shouted at. It was quieter, almost invisible, and that made it harder to explain to anyone because it would sound too small to matter." He looked up, eyes shimmering. "But it did matter." I nodded gently. Small hurts can be the deepest ones. He continued, "After the presentation, people didn't look at me the same. When we had group activities, I was always chosen last, not because I couldn't help, but because they believed I didn't matter. Even when I shared ideas, they acted like they didn't hear me. And if someone repeated the same idea, suddenly it was good." A faint, sad smile appeared on his face, not because anything was funny, but because pain sometimes disguises itself. I began sit-in at the back of the class.
not because it was comfortable, but because it felt safer there. It was easier to disappear at the back, easier to pretend I didn't want to be part of anything. He inhaled shakily, and then there was the teacher. His fingers tightened. She wasn't bad, Mom. She wasn't cruel. She was just busy, too busy to notice. And when you are hurting, being invisible feels worse than being wrong. I felt my heart stretch painfully, but I stayed calm. What happened with her? I asked softly. He blinked slowly. Well, every time she praised someone, I felt smaller. And when she corrected me, even gently, I heard it as proof that I really wasn't good enough. I know she didn't mean it like that. I really know. But my mind had already picked a side, and it wasn't on my side anymore. He paused, breathing through the memory. There were days when I raised my hand, hoping she would call on me, not because I needed to talk, but because I needed to exist. I swallowed quietly. One day, she continued, when she was assigning roles for a project, she looked directly at me and said, "Maybe it's best if you take something simple this time." She probably meant to help, but in that moment, it felt like even adults thought I couldn't be trusted with anything meaningful. He looked at me again, his voice barely a whisper, and that's when I stopped trying. Silence filled the room, but it wasn't empty. It was heavy with truth, finally spoken. He wiped his cheek with the back of his wrist. "I didn't want you to think I was weak, Mom, so I kept acting normal. I laughed when you joked. I ate dinner with everyone. I pretended everything was fine. But the truth is, every single day felt like walking with a stone inside my chest." My voice remained soft, steady. "You were never weak. You were wounded." His eyes closed, almost as if those words allowed him to breathe differently. He took a slow breath, letting his shoulders relax just a little, as if finally speaking the truth had allowed some of the weight to shift, not disappear, but move. "When everything at school started feeling heavy," he said quietly, "I didn't know where to put all the feelings I couldn't talk about. I didn't want to disappoint you or Dad. I didn't want to make you worried, and I didn't want you to think I couldn't handle life." He looked at me with a tiny, sad smile, the kind someone uses when they're trying to be brave even through their pain. He paused, staring into the distance, not at the wall, not at the floor, but somewhere far away where he had stored all those memories. "When everything at school started feeling heavy," he said quietly, "I didn't know where to put all the feelings I couldn't talk about. I didn't want to disappoint you or Dad. I didn't want to make you worried, and I didn't want you to think I couldn't handle life." He looked at me with a tiny sad smile, the kind someone uses when they're trying to be brave even through their pain. He paused, staring into the distance, not at the wall, not at the floor, but somewhere far away where he had stored all those memories. I listened, my heart quiet, my breath soft, reminding myself, this moment was about him, not my guilt, not my answers, not my explanations. He continued, "One night, after a really hard day, I came home feeling like I was made of glass. I didn't want anyone to see me like that because I felt that if someone even touched me, I would shatter." He swallowed. "So I went to take a shower. At first, it was just to calm down, to feel the water and let my mind slow down. But something happened that night. It was the only place where no one could hear me be honest." He didn't say what honesty meant. He didn't need to. I understood. A shower is a place where people can cry quietly, where no one asks questions, where sound is hidden in water, where breathing and tears look the same. He looked down at his hands. He said softly, "I felt safe there. Not happy, but safe. It was the only place where I didn't have to pretend." He took a slow breath, and after that, Whenever the thoughts got too loud, or my chest felt too tight, or I felt like I was disappearing inside myself, I went to the bathroom, turned on the water, and just sat there. He paused again, letting the silence speak for him. It wasn't about being clean. It was about having a place where my feelings could exist without hurting anyone else. I closed my eyes gently for a second, feeling tears form but not fall, because this moment was his courage, not my breaking. When I opened them again, he continued, "It became my secret room, not for hiding from you, but for surviving what I didn't know how to handle." The way he said surviving was not dramatic, it was honest. He confesses the thoughts or fears that scared him the most. He exhaled slowly as if choosing each word with great care. His eyes did not meet mine at first, not because he was hiding, but because saying some truths out loud can feel heavier than carrying them alone. After a long pause, he finally whispered,
Mom, the part that scared me the most wasn't the sadness. It was the thoughts that came with it. I stayed still. No questions, no reactions, just warmth and space. He continued, speaking quietly, as if holding both courage and fear at once. I started believing that I didn't matter, and once that thought settled in, everything changed. I began to wonder if things would be easier for everyone if I just disappeared from their worries. He didn't say it dramatically. He said it like someone stating a fact they lived with silently. I didn't want to hurt myself, he clarified quickly, his voice trembling. I wasn't planning anything like that. It was just this feeling that I wasn't important, like the world would continue the exact same way without me. I nodded very slowly, making sure he felt heard, not judged. Sometimes, he added quietly, I looked in the mirror and felt like I was watching someone else, not me. Like my body was there, but the real me was hiding somewhere inside, too small for anyone to notice. My heart ached quietly. He rubbed his palms together slowly, grounding himself, then said, "And the scariest fear was not that others didn't care. It was the fear that maybe I would stop caring too." That sentence held more weight than anything before. I leaned just slightly forward, voice steady and soft. "I'm here. You're not alone. You matter more than you think." He swallowed hard, then nodded, not because everything was okay, but because someone had finally seen him all the way through. He wiped his cheeks with the edge of his sleeve, not to hide the tears, but like someone finally allowing themselves to feel after a long time of holding everything in. He took a quiet breath, the kind that comes after hesitation, but before courage. "What I needed," he whispered, "was something I didn't know how to say." I didn't rush him. I let the silence be a soft place to land. He looked up, eyes shining with both pain and honesty. I needed tiny signs that someone could see I was struggling. His voice softened even more. I needed someone to sit near me without asking a lot of questions. I needed someone to say it's okay not to be okay every day. I needed someone to remind me that I didn't have to be strong all the time. I needed someone to tell me that my presence mattered, that I mattered. His lower lip trembled gently. I needed comfort, but I didn't know how to ask for it without feeling like a burden. My breathing slowed to match his pace. He continued. I needed someone to notice that my smile looked different, or that I spoke less, or that I stayed longer in the shower, or that my eyes looked tired in the mornings. He exhaled shakily. I needed someone to say, "I'm here if you want to talk, and I will stay even if you don't." He paused, pressing his palms together. And most of all, I needed to feel like I didn't have to earn love by being okay.
His final words were barely about a whisper. I needed permission to feel without feeling like I was failing. My eyes softened, filling with emotion, but not spilling because in that moment, he needed steady, not shaken. She hugs him tightly and speaks affirmations softly. The moment his last sentence settled into the quiet air, I felt something shift inside me. Not like a sudden shock, but like a realization that arrives slowly, the way light quietly enters a room at sunrise. Without saying anything right away, I gently moved closer and opened my arms, not forcefully, not urgently, but like a safe place waiting with patience. He hesitated for just a second, as if making sure he was allowed to accept comfort, and when he finally leaned into me, it wasn't with dramatic crying or trembling. It was with a slow, tired exhale, like someone finally putting down a heavy suitcase after walking for miles. My arms wrapped around him, not tight enough to trap him, but firm enough to let him feel present and not invisible. I placed my hand softly on the back of his head and spoke in a voice that carried only warmth. You don't have to pretend anymore. He closed his eyes, breathing against my shoulder. I continued, speaking slowly, as if each sentence was meant to settle gently on his heart. You are not a burden. You are not a problem to solve. You are someone who deserves care, even on the days you feel quiet, tired, or unsure. He didn't reply, but the way his body relaxed told me he heard every word. I rested my cheek lightly against his hair. Then I added gently, you never have to hide your feelings in the shower again. If you ever need to talk, cry, sit silently, or just have someone near you, I will be here. A single tear slid down his cheek, not because he was breaking, but because he was finally allowed to feel. We stayed like that for a while, not counting minutes, not thinking about what came next, just breathing in the same quiet space, finally on the same side of the story. Then, softly, we heard footsteps outside the door. They weren't hurried or tense, just slow, careful steps of someone who wasn't sure if they should enter or stay behind the wall. There was a small knock. Not the kind that demanded an answer, but the kind that asked for permission.
Is everything okay in there? It was his father's voice, gentle, unsure, as if he already sensed more than he knew. I looked at my son, and for the first time that night, he didn't hide. He didn't look away. He simply nodded once, a silent sign that he was ready to not face the world alone. So I answered softly, you can come in. The door opened slowly, and his father stepped inside with confusion, worry, and quiet fear in his eyes, the kind that only exists when a man loves deeply, but feels unprepared to help. He saw us sitting together, my arms around our son, and instead of asking questions, instead of assuming, instead of reacting, he knelt down beside us. What happened? He whispered, not as a demand, but as someone offering a safe place. Our son looked at him, and for a moment, his expression changed, not to sadness, not to anger, but to something fragile, hope. He didn't speak immediately. He simply leaned a little toward me first, and then toward his father, like someone testing the temperature of trust. His father didn't rush. He didn't talk over him. He simply reached out and placed a hand gently on his son's back. I'm here too, he said quietly. I didn't know, but I want to understand. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Our son inhaled slowly, and then he did something we hadn't seen him do in a very long time. He let himself be held by both of us. Not as a child who needed rescuing, not as a boy who failed, not as someone who needed to explain, but as a human who finally felt seen. And in that small, simple, unplanned moment, the three of us sat on the bathroom floor like a circle that had finally closed, not to trap anyone in, but to keep anyone from falling out. The three of us stayed there quietly, our breaths slowly matching, the quiet dripping of the bathroom tap and the faint hum of the heater becoming a gentle rhythm that filled the space between us. No one spoke for a long moment. No one needed to. And in that silence, something shifted. Small, fragile, but real. We didn't fix everything that night. We didn't erase the hurt, the fear, the invisible days when our son carried too much alone. But we did something equally important. We showed up. We stayed present. We offered comfort without judgment. We offered love without conditions. Our son leaned slightly into the hug, his face finally softening, his body relaxing. And in that simple, quiet gesture, the first threads of trust and safety began to weave themselves into our family again. The night ended not with a resolution, but with presence, with the promise of being there and the quiet hope that tomorrow we could try again together, step by step. And that was enough for this night, for this moment, for the first real moment we felt like a family, truly seen and together. The morning after that quiet night felt different, not magically, not like everything had been fixed, but like the air in the house was lighter, softer, warmer. It wasn't something we said, it was something we felt. I noticed him moving a little slower, but with less tension in his shoulders. He didn't rush through breakfast. He sat at the table with us, but he didn't hide behind silence. He looked at the food, then at us, then back again. Small gestures, simple signs that he was present. I didn't force conversation. I didn't try to interrogate him or cheer him up with words. I simply poured warm milk into his cup and smiled gently. "That's yours," I said softly. He nodded, accepted it, and for the first time in a long while, he let himself be there. Slow steps of daily rebuilding. Over the next few days, the focus was small things. Not lectures, not long discussions, but tiny, ordinary moments that slowly reminded him he was safe and loved. Leaving the bathroom door slightly open, allowing him choice and control. Sitting quietly together after school, sometimes just reading books side by side. Offering to make his favorite snack, no questions asked. Small acknowledgments like, "I noticed you smiled today," or "Thanks for helping me with that." Gentle encouragements, not commands, letting him feel capable without pressure. Each moment wasn't dramatic, but each moment carried a quiet message. You are here. You belong. You are seen. Father's gentle presence. His father started joining these small moments too. At first, he was careful, hesitant, almost awkward, like he wasn't sure how to approach someone so fragile. But our son began to respond, slowly, leaning just a little toward his father's presence, allowing small touches, a hand on the shoulder, a quiet word of praise, a shared smile. No lectures, no pressure, just attention without judgment. One evening, we sat together in the living room, watching a soft, neutral video on the TV. Our son rested his head on his father's arm. I sat beside him, holding his hand gently, and for the first time in months, the house felt like a home again. Not perfect, not fixed, but safe, warm, and full of small, honest love. Moments of growth. He began to share small things. A story from school, a joke he overheard, or a drawing he made during lunch. Nothing huge, just tiny openings of trust. And when he did, we celebrated them softly, with a smile, a gentle word. We're just sitting together in quiet pride. No pressure to do more. No expectations. Even the shower no longer carried fear. Some nights, he chose to shower in silence. Other nights, he allowed us to talk quietly nearby. Each choice, each small act became a victory, a step toward reclaiming his world, one tiny moment at a time. The days passed quietly, but with small signs of life returning. Our son began to talk about school again, not in panic, not in fear, but with cautious hope. One afternoon, while we were having a calm snack in the living room, he looked up and said softly, "Mom, maybe I can talk to someone tomorrow. A friend." I felt my heart swell, quietly. I didn't push him or ask why. I simply nodded and said, "That sounds good. You can try as much or as little as you want. I'll be here if you want to tell me about it after." He smiled faintly, the kind of small smile that holds a lot of courage. The small ritual. That evening, we decided to start a small family ritual, something safe, predictable, and comforting. Not forced, not dramatic, just a quiet way to show we're always here for each other. Every night before he went to bed, we would gather in the living room, light a small candle or lamp for warmth, sit together in a circle. Each of us would say one small thing about our day, not problems, just moments we noticed, enjoyed, or were grateful for. It was simple. He could speak or stay quiet. He could choose to leave the circle at any time. The first night, he stayed only halfway through, but he didn't leave in fear. He stayed close, letting us see him. "I like this," he whispered quietly. "It feels safe." And that word safe felt like sunlight breaking through months of clouds. Slow reconnection at school. The next day, when he went to school, we didn't pressure him. We didn't give long speeches or lists of must-dos. Instead, we practiced small, simple affirmations in the morning. "You are brave for trying. You deserve kindness. You can be seen and safe today." He whispered them to himself as he left, and I could see his shoulder straightening just a fraction. At school, he didn't immediately join the big group or stand out. He simply approached one friend he trusted, quietly, carefully. They exchanged a soft smile, a small joke, and for the first time in months, he felt like he belonged somewhere outside home, even if only a little. When he returned that afternoon, he told us about it in pieces, small, fragmented sentences, but filled with hope and pride. I talked to Anaya. We shared some notes. She laughed at my joke. I think maybe it's okay. We nodded and smiled because we knew it was enough. Not perfection, not instant social triumph, just the first step of reconnecting. Evening reflection. That night, we gathered again for our small circle. He stayed longer than the night before. He even lit his own tiny lamp, placing it carefully on the table beside the candle. "This is mine too," he said softly, "and it makes me feel like I belong here." And in that quiet statement, we realized our ritual was more than a routine. It was a safe harbor, a way to rebuild trust, presence, and belonging, one gentle step at a time. The weeks that followed were not perfect.
there were still quiet days when he seemed withdrawn, and moments when old fears flickered in his eyes. But those moments no longer ruled the house. They were small waves in a calm sea, reminders that healing is a process, not a moment. Small victories. We kept our nightly ritual, the circle of light, the gentle sharing, the quiet affirmations of presence. Some nights, he spoke freely. Other nights, he stayed silent, and that was okay too. He started joining small group activities at school again, sharing jokes, helping with projects, not because he was trying to prove anything, but because he was ready to be seen and connected. At home, laughter returned slowly, a soft clucker during breakfast, a quiet joke during homework, a gentle teasing between father and son, and sometimes just the comfort of sitting together, knowing no one was alone. Father-son bonding. His father began spending more time with him, sharing small hobbies they both enjoyed, fixing a model airplane, cooking a simple meal, or walking quietly together in the evening. These moments weren't dramatic. They weren't a grand reconciliation speech. They were small gestures of presence, quiet proof that he was loved exactly as he was. Mother's reflection. I often sat quietly in the evenings, watching the two of them laugh over something small, and I realized something important. We don't fix pain by force. We heal it with presence, patience, and love. Every tear shared, every quiet hug, every small ritual of trust was more powerful than any lecture, any advice, any scolding. And in that realization, I felt a gentle hope that no matter the challenges life brings,
We could face them together as a family that saw, heard, and held each other. One night after our circle, he came to me and whispered, "Thank you, Mom, for staying, for listening, for letting me be me." I held his hands gently, looking into his eyes, and said softly, "You never had to thank me. I will always be here. Always." His father joined us quietly, placing a hand on his shoulder, and simply said, "We're together. That's what matters." And in that simple, quiet moment, I realized something beautiful. We weren't just surviving. We were healing. We were rebuilding trust, love, and hope, one gentle step at a time. The fear, the silence, the hidden pain, they hadn't disappeared completely, but they no longer controlled us. We had found each other again, and that was enough. Subtle moral, life lesson. Sometimes the people we love the most don't need perfect solutions. They just need presence, patience, and unconditional care. Sometimes showing up is more powerful than fixing anything. And sometimes the quiet moments of trust, the small gestures of love, are what truly heal a heart. Because in the end, being seen, being heard, and being loved exactly as you are is what makes a home a safe place to grow. Thanks for listening. Did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.